All right, hello and welcome back, everybody. Today's a big day for our class because we're going to be taking our very first step into working on our paper. I'm hoping that some of you have had a chance to go online on the class website and post something on the discussion section if you're looking to work with others. Not getting to crunch time. It's getting pretty close to being too late, but you might be able to get something in still. But regardless of whether or not you're working with others or working alone on this paper for the class, we're at a big point because what we're going to be doing in this next section of the class is deciding on what it is we're going to be focusing our attention on for the entirety of the course. Specifically, you're going to be picking a topic that you are going to be focusing your research in on in this class. Now, as we've talked about in the first lecture, we're not going to be conducting a physical study for this class. I'm going to be giving you data that's made up so you don't have to collect subjects and you don't have to do special types of recruiting. You don't have to go through a couple different hoops to be able to even start the study. But what we're going to be doing in this class is, again, sort of doing a project without the physical components of running people. And to do that, we are going to have to settle in on a topic of interest. Now, as I mentioned in the very beginning, you sort of have two options for this class when you're picking your paper topic. You can do something that's going to be geared toward the senior thesis that you'll be writing later, or you do have the potential to just write a paper that sort of works for you now. Doesn't necessarily have to be something that you're going to carry it over to. It's just relating to an area of interest. In this class, whether or not you can actually feasibly do something as a senior project is immaterial. I'm hoping you can think of stuff that will be doable. And in fact, in the comments section, when I look at what you're writing, I might very well make a couple comments about, was this really something that you could actually do? Think about the timelines, think about whether or not this is something that's physically possible to analyze. The general idea we're looking for here in this class, we're just practicing for the senior thesis. So it's a little bit more open-ended as to what you can study. I know many of you coming into this class probably already have an area of interest that you're thinking about. Maybe you got attracted to clinical psychology or cognitive psychology or social psychology or any other branch of psychology that's out there. And that's a great place to start, a general area of interest. But as you probably learned in some of your other classes, when you're running research studies, you have to be more specific than just saying, hey, I want to study something in social psychology, or I want to study even something about depression. You have to really narrow in the scope on what it is you're looking at. I know some of you have had classes where you've learned about these things called lit reviews, where you've learned how to dig through different databases and different libraries so you can grab articles and books and other resources out there that help you learn more about a topic of interest, and maybe even within that lit review, figure out what your research study could focus on. Also know some of you maybe have never encountered this before. Not real thrilled with some of the methods and structures that have done this in other classes. But regardless of where you're at with regards to your experience in this, a lit review is a very critical step that we want you to know before you get to that senior thesis, because this can be a huge hurdle for students trying to complete their papers. And just coming up with an idea that's feasible is a big challenge. And there's lots of reasons why it's a big challenge. One is you just can't think of something to study. The other thing that sometimes comes up for people once they start doing the lit reviews is they come up with ideas of something that might make sense, but those ideas are either too simple, which is very rarely the case, or too complicated, where they're thinking of 20, 30 different things that they want to study, or all these different types of analyses that they want to do and ideas that they want to implement that doesn't fit within the statistical abilities of the person that's choosing this, or the timeline that somebody's going to be faced with when they get to that senior thesis class. We're going to do some practice in this section on how to do a lit review, and then also how to kind of narrow down what it is you're studying so you can make sure you're prepared to be successful when you get into this for that senior thesis if you do decide to pivot. And if you don't decide to pivot, you get to start the process of learning how to study these topics. So what you see in front of you right now is a web page for this Cal State East Bay Libraries. It's a great place to start, and more specifically, the place that you're going to start is with the psychology research journals that are out there. Now, there's a couple different ones that are out there. One of the ones that's very, very complicated and helpful when you're looking for books, and chapters, and other stuff that goes beyond the typical research journal articles that people look at is something called Academic Search Complete. It's a very powerful search engine that will give you access to pretty much every major resource out there that researchers would potentially use for their papers or books that they're writing. Now, to access Academic Search Complete, you will need to log into your Cal State East Bay account. You'll see a firewall that pops up when you try to access it just off of a computer that's off campus. If you're accessing it through our campus server, you'll be able to access this instantly because it does, of course, have to check for your Cal State East Bay accounts to even have you accessing computers there or to be using the internet there. But regardless of whether or not you have to log in, or you have access to it immediately, you probably would want to check out this particular search engine. Maybe not necessarily too much for this class, but you might want to get familiarized with it for that senior thesis that you're going to be writing. And as you can see, I'm trying to access this from home, so it's asking me to log in order to access this search engine. The other search engine that you can use, and I would probably suggest this is the one that you can lean on more for in this particular class, is one called PsycInfo. Again, for this one, you're going to need to log on. And this means you have to put in your ID and your password. And once you've done that, you will see a search engine that looks like this. Now, this search engine, PsycInfo one, focuses on a few more academic based resources. You see here it says that you can find articles, books, journals, and a couple other things. Pretty much everything that you'd find in Academic Search Complete is just more narrowed in on psychology specific things and books that are more for academic purposes. Doesn't mean, again, that Academic Search Complete's a bad option. It's just a broader option. So if you're interested in studying a topic and enter in some terms in the search engine in that particular one versus this one, PsycInfo, what you'll find is way more resources that are available to you. Sometimes you might find stuff that you couldn't get here that could be very helpful. Other times you might find that you're sifting through a lot of stuff that's immaterial to what it is you're studying. And since we're going to try to focus our attention in this lit review on just finding journal articles, I would suggest again using this particular search engine, PsycArticles, over Academic Search Complete for this assignment. What is the actual assignment, you might be asking? Well, what you need to do for this particular assignment is pick a topic, something that you, again, will probably run your research study on, run being just kind of coming up with the hypothetical idea of what you would do, me giving you data, and then you analyzing that data. So you're going to come up with an idea of something that you'd like to study. And then after you come up with that idea, you're going to find articles on this specific topic so you can narrow it in on specifically what you're going to be doing. So what I usually encourage people to do when they're brainstorming ideas is just see what's out there. So I mentioned depression before. So let's say you do want to study the topic of depression. You don't want to stop there because if you just do a search for depression, what you're going to find, even in PsycInfo, is a lot of different resources, 404,000 different resources focus in on the topic of depression. way more than you would want to dig through, especially if you're looking for themes or kind of an overlapping topic that you might want to study. So let's say instead of just looking for an article on depression, you look for an article on something like depression and, I don't know, friend making. I don't know what could be something out there, but let's say we search for those things. And what we'll find when we look for two different topics is a significantly condensed list of things that are out there. Some of the things that you're going to find are about journals or are about books. That's not, again, necessarily what we're looking for in this. What you're looking for is articles that focus in on the specific thing that you're looking for. So you can see this one talks a little bit about friends. It's in a journal called Major, wow, it's just a subject. I don't know what this is called. Oh, this is called Brain Injury. I don't even know what journal that is. You're going to see this a lot, right? Lots of different things maybe don't necessarily fit your interests, right? Making friends, depression, great. This one talks about Grinder, and whether or not that can be used for other things. It's in the Journal of Homosexuality. Maybe that's an interesting topic for you. Maybe that's what you want to focus your attention on. If you're not necessarily thrilled with that specific thing as being your main topic, you don't have to go through these things. There's lots of different articles out there. Some of them are definitely a little bit harder to access. This one's in a foreign language, if I can process this correctly. Maybe it's translated, but I'm pretty sure that's not translated. So unless it looks like it's, I can't tell which language that is. I'm guessing Spanish, might be Portuguese, but either way, unless you can read foreign languages, some of these aren't necessarily going to be accessible. And then you might find once you start digging through these things that sort of fit. So let's say making friends with uncertainty, group intervention, tolerating intolerance. Great. Cognitive behavioral therapist. Let's say you see this one and you say, wow, this looks exactly like what I'm looking for. One of the things I would suggest doing, if you do find one that looks like what you're looking for, is see if you can access this. Now, pretty much every journal article that you're going to be looking for should be obtainable nowadays. And that's because almost every article that we use as researchers is stored on some gigantic database that you have access to because of the fact that you logged into your Cal State East Bay account. So I clicked on the DOI, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later. You see the gist of the article that comes up, and you should be able to, if I click on it again, access the full article. This is the DOI. Why is it doing that? I might need to re-access it. So I think I probably need to log in through my institution. Yep, that's what it is. So it'll ask you to log in again through your institution. You'll have to go through the steps to do that. And then you should be able to access the articles with those DOIs. Now, some of you know what a DOI is. Others, I might be speaking some new foreign language that you haven't heard before. These DOIs are the web links that allow researchers to include where they got their resources from in a reference page, which is a listing of all the things that you come up with, key elements to what we're going to be doing here. And it's kind of a digital code that allows people to go to those articles and then through the proper channels, like logging in through their institution, access the key articles that somebody is using so they can read word for word what it is the person got from the articles that they're talking about within their lit reviews or within their papers or books that they're writing. Now, this again is just one article. Maybe once you read it and go through it, you think, I don't know if that's necessarily exactly what I wanted to find. It's fine. You can go back to the drawing board and look for more stuff within your search. Hopefully you have something that's manageable, like the 40-ish that we found here. But regardless of whether or not you find anything within that first search, there's always the opportunity if you've started to look and recognize there's some issues, to change your approach, to change the topic that you're maybe interested in looking at. And this is a really critical time when you're starting your research. There are some people I know in this class that already have a plan in place. They think they're going to study this thing, and they know that they're going to study this thing for years, and now they're just going to accumulate what they need to be able to start working on that project. It's fine. But one of the things that we run into as instructors, sometimes people choose paths that aren't necessarily optimal. Maybe they are choosing to study something that would be extremely time consuming, or maybe they're picking a topic like clinical psychology or like child psychology that simply isn't something that can be studied as a senior project. People struggling with mental health issues, people who are below the age of 18 are all parts of what we call protected populations. The same thing with the elderly as well. There's other subsets within the population that fit into this category. They're parts of these groups. As we're going to talk about a little bit later for applications, you have to jump through a lot more hoops to be able to do studies on these individuals. It's not impossible to do it. You're going to try to get through a study in a semester. That's when the timeline just doesn't physically work, because the application process is much more involved. The procedures that you have to be involved with is much more involved. And the training that you need, special training that you need to be able to run those studies, is significant. There's also issues with respect to cost and just the ability to access these individuals in an ethical way that also tends to pop up. So when you're picking your topic, the point here is that you want to be a little flexible if you haven't already had your heart set on something for a very long period of time. And heck, even if you've had your heart set on something for a long period of time, take a step back and really think about whether or not studying these things are feasible. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, you don't necessarily have to take what you're doing here and turn it into your senior thesis project. But honestly, if you can do something here that's doable, it's going to make that next section or the next time you take that senior thesis class a heck of a lot easier. And that's something that I want you to think about or consider when you are coming up with your topic. So I know I typed in depression and friend making, but honestly, I did that because it's a tough topic. It's one that would be very challenging for somebody to study as a senior thesis. There's also one I know from my experience with students when they do lit reviews and other stuff, people are naturally drawn to. I mean, I know a lot of people wanting to get into psychology have interest in clinical psychology or have interest in children or have interest in the elderly, groups that are considered, again, sensitive groups. That's perfectly fine. It's wonderful that you have interest in those topics. But I do need to warn you that for a senior project, studying those populations is all but impossible unless you have an extended timeline to be able to do something. You've really done a lot of work in advance to be able to gain access to these individuals and kind of the work that needs to be done for this type of research. So I can't force you to do this, but what I would suggest doing when you're running these searches is run searches on stuff that's relatively benign, sort of doable. So you could do something on like memory and, well, go back to friend making, friend making. Maybe people who have good memories are better friends, or maybe ones that have crummy memories don't make friends. I'm just totally spitballing it here with ideas. You're doing those types of searches, what you're going to find sometimes is less information out there. So you probably have to tweak the verbiage, tweak what it is exactly you want to study, and look at how different things connect. But from that limited set of resources, you can come up with an idea that makes things doable. You might be asking now, resources do I need? Well, for this specific assignment, you are required to come up with 4 resources, 4 preferably journal articles. Those are those 10 to 20-ish page papers that are found in what we call peer-reviewed journals. Journals or publications that usually focus in on specific topics and are published periodically. Sometimes they're published once a month, sometimes they're published quarterly, sometimes they're published annually. Sometimes there's just one or two journal publications ever on a specific topic if it's narrow enough. But regardless of how often something is published, when you're looking at articles, usually those are your best resources for your research papers. Books can help. I know many of you getting accustomed to academia have relied primarily on books your entire career, but as you advance through undergraduate education and graduate school, we try to transition you away from using books as your primary resources because they do cover so many things that they have to be a little bit more simplistic and they can't be completely current once they're written. So we transition people away from those books to articles so they can start to be familiar with how they're written, how they're approached. We'll talk about that pretty soon. And then they can use those for their ideas, and that allows them to stay more current. So what you need for this particular assignment is 4 articles that relate to your topic of interest. Hopefully 4 articles that you can weave together to eventually come up with an idea. Now, for this assignment, you are not required to dissect the articles themselves. I just need you to get them. I need you to be able to access them so you can start the process of going through them and writing summaries of them. That's going to be an assignment that's coming up very, very soon. This one, you just need to find those 4 articles. What you're going to do after you find those 4 articles, again, usually through PsycInfo, if you've got another database you'd like to use, that, not necessarily preventing you from doing that, but this is definitely probably the easier article resource to use. Once you've found those 4 articles, you're going to get the actual article, save it on your computer, and then you're going to provide me with a reference page, an APA formatted reference page. Again, my guess is there's a pretty big spread as to how familiar people are with this particular process. I'm guessing some of you have had a lot of familiarity with APA formatting. It's American Psychological Association formatting, kind of a set of rules for how to present information in books and in chapters and us in this particular moment for research articles. If you don't have much familiarity with it, well, we're going to be kind of having a crash course on APA formatting throughout this class. I would even suggest if you don't have much familiarity with it, that you consider actually getting the APA formatting book that you can get online from the American Psychological Association, is then you can always reference stuff a little bit more easily as you're progressing. You don't need it. Nowadays, there's lots of online resources available to help you with formatting. But historically, people, when they've started to get familiar with this, they have usually gone online and purchased this APA formatting guide just so they can always quick reference it and not worry about, is this particular website that I'm looking at current? There are issues with this particular grouping because these things do get updated. And unfortunately, with websites, you can't always be clear what version or what edition of APA formatting guides they're actually using. Well, we're going to use some pages here in this class, but no, as time progresses, some of these pages will become more and more obsolete as to how to actually format reference page and also how to format citations, something we'll talk about a little bit later when we get into the written portion of the assignments. So what are you going to be doing then when you're referencing the 4 articles? Well, what you're going to be doing is presenting them in a very specific format that allows readers, when looking at those references, figure out exactly what you're looking at and where that information is accessed. Obviously, one of the biggest things that you need for these are those DOIs that I spoke of earlier. That is included at the end of every reference nowadays when you are including references in your reference page. But depending upon what it is you're actually accessing, a journal article, a chapter, or a book, you might, or even a website or a video or other stuff that you might use later on, you're going to need other stuff. You're going to need other details. That's where the whole formatting guide thing comes into play. Because when you're presenting that information in addition to a URL or a DOI or something like that, you're going to need to provide very specific information. So again, the reader knows how to access stuff if for some weird reason the DOI that you provide doesn't work, or maybe even the resource you have somehow doesn't have a DOI. So there's lots of different reference lists and reference links that are out there. But one of the ones that I liked was actually one of the first things I found on the Google search that actually goes over the different types of resources that you have and the ways that things are supposed to be listed. Sorry, allergy season, really, really itchy eye right now. Anyways, so one of the places that you're probably going to be clicking on if you go to the web link that's on our class website for the second module is this link right here on that web link that's there that lists exactly how you're supposed to present information. What you see here is kind of a description of the details that you're supposed to present, the ways that they're supposed to be presented, and the order that they're presented in. So you see certain things are italicized, certain things are capitalized. There's different ways to list stuff in terms of nation even. You've got the dash versus the word to. All of this stuff has to be done in the correct format, like you see here. And it might seem tedious, it might seem a little ridiculous, but it's all done for a very specific purpose. Again, essentially, when you do this correctly, anybody looking for those resources that you're using for your article can quickly look at them, verify that they exist, and hopefully, if you're providing the right DOI, access them immediately. Even if you're not presenting the right DOI for some inexplicable reason, yeah, they'll be able to access this information pretty quickly by just doing a search for that title of the article or maybe even the journal itself that's out there. And there's lots of reasons why people might want to look for this. It's not just verifying that you're talking about something accurately. It might be, hey, they have an interest now in what you're talking about, and they want to see what's included in those articles, or they want to tie something that was used within that article with another thing, so they need to be able to access it. Lots of reasons for why these things need to be accessible. So we're going to really push hard in this assignment, being able to present our reference page in APA format. So if you're familiar with this, great, wonderful. Just make sure you provide a reference page that's in APA format. If you're not familiar with this, if this is brand new to you, this will take time. This is not something that should be done at the last minute, where you quickly do journal search, find four articles that sort of work, you're not sure, and you just copy and paste something that's listed somewhere and hope that it's in the right format. That's a really dangerous recipe. I've had students that have done that in the past, and honestly, it's usually the start to a path of not completing this class because you don't have the right resources, you don't know how to access them, not even presenting them right in the very first place. And you're kind of already starting the whole procrastination thing, which can be deadly as a researcher. So when you're working on these things, regardless of whether or not this is your first reference page or it's your 10th or 20th reference page, I want to make sure that you're doing this right. So take your time on this, make sure you're including all the critical information. Use this resource that's being provided here or any other resource that you can find online to help you better organize this reference page that you're going to include. Because if you do this well here, taking care of a lot of stuff, it's going to pop up later on. If you don't really take the time to do this well here, the next assignment's going to be a lot tougher. And then after that, the next one's probably going to be more challenging. And when you get to the rough drafts of things, you're going to have to go right back to the beginning and do this all over again. So taking your time on this will be a huge time saver overall. And it's going to help you on the path to coming up with a really good product. So if you can, make sure you do the search for your articles. or your books and chapters, but primarily articles as soon as you can. Make sure you go over APA formatting so you can present the resources that you choose, 4 to be exact, in the correct order. And once you get those things all together, you're going to submit them online in our course modules tab. You'll see a link within it for where to submit it. And once you've done that, once you've submitted that information, I'll get over, verify that it's there, and give you hopefully full credit for this particular component of the class. I think that covers it all. I know I went off on a bunch of tangents, so this is a little bit longer video than I anticipated, but those tangents are very helpful, hopefully. But in terms of everything we needed to cover today, we're good. So please, if you've still got questions, if you need me to re-clarify things, send me a message. I'm happy to either just answer them via email or set up an appointment with you so we can be sure that you're on the right track. Because if you get off already here, things start to fall apart. So really being clear on what's expected of you here is something I want to stress. So I'm not going to hesitate to schedule something special for you in terms of a one-on-one if you can't make office hours. Happy to break down exactly what we need to cover in a meeting, or something where we can talk about it via email, because this is something that really is critical, even if it's not worth a ton of points in the grand scheme of how your grades determine. So please take your time on this. As I've said before, make sure you get it in on time. We can technically turn it in late for half credit, but I'm trying to be as harsh as I can with turning things in late for this class, because if you start falling behind, you can't advance to the next thing and everything starts to snowball. So keeping ahead of things is really important, hence the pretty tough late deductions that are included in some of these assignments. But hopefully that's not even an issue. You're going to be on top of stuff, and you're not quite there and you need some help. You're going to be willing to reach out and make sure that we can get you on the right page. For today, again, think we're at the finish line. So thank you for bearing with me throughout the entirety of this lecture. Hopefully you didn't have to pause too many times. Hopefully I didn't scare you away. So I will see you again in the next module when we start looking at how to dissect this information that you're accumulating this time. Thanks again. I'll see you soon.